Hey, everybody, welcome to the Anything But Typical podcast. Real stories from entrepreneurs, not just the wins. Oh, now that's important, not just the wins, because we got a race car driver on here, Erin Vogel. Can't wait to get into your story. But hey, if you like what you hear, would you please subscribe, smash that like button, and share it, okay? So, Erin, here's the scenario. Found out before the recording got moving that you love to go hiking. And you and your partner love going hiking. And the first baby thing that you bought was a backpack to handle the baby for hiking, which I think that shows where your love is and where your priorities are, which is great. So you're in Southern California, and you said in the summer, which this is going to be airing in the summer, so we're going to go with that location. You like going to Idlewild because you can get up there and you can see the ocean, you can see the valley, you can see everything, and it should be a beautiful time of year. So that's awesome. So you have just parked at your favorite parking spot, getting ready to go do that hike, and somebody sees you, recognizes you without that race car helmet on, and they're like, hey, that's Erin Vogel. And they start talking about you, not realizing that everything that they say you can hear and understand. What would you want somebody to say about you?
I would probably hope to overhear them talking about uh, how I'm changing the way things look in racing for the better, and that we're spearheading the entry of more and more women into racing, and that it's actually making the sport more fun, and making the sport interesting. Actually, I did overhear one time someone said, you know, I wasn't as it was a female, a woman. She said, "I wasn't interested in racing because no one in racing looked like me, and now you're racing, and I suddenly feel like it's something I can watch, because I can relate to it in a new way now." So I think that's probably what I would hope to continue to hear, and hope to continue to hear that it's, just making a positive impact. What we're doing is making a positive impact.
I love that, man.
Yeah, the ripple effect that we can have on people is pretty amazing. So it's cool that you actually had this experience where you overheard somebody talking. Because we'll ask this question. It's the only thing we do on every episode, and we'll ask it every time. And maybe we've had one other time where somebody said they actually overheard somebody saying something. So pretty neat that you experienced that. So, for the listeners and viewers, Erin is a semi retired sports car racing driver and founder and CEO of AE Victory Racing. So, we're going to dive into the business side of stuff. But first, we want to hear a little bit more of the backstory because your origin into and entry into racing looks a little bit different than the kid that got stuck in a car at 4 years old and has been on dirt tracks ever since, right? So talk to us a little bit about how you got interested in racing and at what stage of your life that was in.
Truthfully, I think I was always kind of interested in it, which kind of sounds bad because I was never a racing fan. Um, my dad grew up with a father, my grandfather, who was like just a very capable person, a doer, and they were really interested in boats. He and my grandma, and so my grandpa built their first racing boat with my dad and my uncle, and they
Oh,
went
wow,
racing
cool.
for many years. Yeah, they did offshore powerboat racing. And so my dad's story is a little similar to mine, where he then, my grandpa and my uncle didn't want to do it anymore, so he went and he navigated for some offshore racing teams, won a world championship with a female,
Wow,
yeah, with a female team owner, which in this late 70s was like
that's
really
incredible.
groundbreaking. Yeah. And she had
Sure.
taken over
Yeah.
the racing team from her husband when he passed away, and won a bunch of championships and did a bunch of cool stuff. She was known as Betty Cook was her name, and she was known as the grandmother of racing. She was always kind of an inspiration. Mom was always an inspiration. She drove snowcats on Mammoth Mountain. And her favorite toy ever is her backhoe. She loves to move rocks around and dig ponds and do things. So I just always, I always had these examples of women who did that I understood from an early age were doing unusual things. So I think, speed was always a love. And we did downhill skiing. So I always loved to ski fast. And when the opportunity came around, my dad and my brother started taking their sports cars to the racetrack when I was in my mid 20s. And when the opportunity came to join them, I was instantly hooked. So it started out with just about 5 years of what we call high performance driver education. So just learning like how to use a car closer and closer to its limits. Um, and then did some racing with my dad for another couple years. And then same as kind of his story, he was like, this is too much work. I don't want to do this anymore. So I went and started getting to know some teams and got into ProAm racing and did that for about 5 years before some things happened that led me to kind of fulfilling my a goal that had become apparent early on in my racing, which was to own a team and provide seats for women racers specifically.
It's amazing. On the racing side, because I want to hit on that a little bit before we dive into the owning, because I think we could spend hours just on that alone. So on the racing side, were there specific moments where you realized this is more than just a hobby for you? Because it seems like you took it seriously pretty quickly.
Yeah. It's funny because again, like I wasn't a race fan and I even told myself in the beginning when I started doing track days that I wasn't competitive enough and I didn't want to go racing because I didn't have that competitive drive, but I think ultimately I was lying to myself. I was afraid of the failure that felt inevitable. Um and I think probably a lot of people experience that, but women maybe particularly. Um Especially in a male dominated area, I think it's easy to feel like, well, if I'm the only one, my failure is going to be more obvious. Or if I'm one of a few, my failure is going to be more obvious. So yeah, it was really intimidating. And I was really lucky to have the support of my dad at the time to help me kind of take those steps. And inevitably I did fail a lot. And that was like just actually ended up being a great lesson and fuel for the fire. And it took a lot of time actually to get my ego to step back so that I could start to learn even more and get better. So it was a really kind of a wild experience from that standpoint. And now I've sort of lost what your question actually was. I got down that path a little bit. So hopefully I answered your.
No, no, that's fine. I was just curious about those moments that you had when you were realizing this is more than just a hobby. So yeah, you were sharing that throughout your stories. You're good.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and the other story that I like to tell is that I was a preschool dropout because someone told me that I couldn't play with the boys in the sandbox the way that they were playing because I was showing my belly, and they came and swatted my hands and said, "You can't do that, you're a girl." And I told my mom, "I don't wanna do this. I don't wanna be at this preschool if they're gonna be that way." So I think I'd always wanted a way to change that, to take that out of the world, to help take that out of the world. And so I think the idea of having a racing team was like the big motivational thing once I realized that that was a platform to affect that change. That was eventually the biggest motivation was like, okay, I want to go learn what racing is all about so that I can eventually be an owner and not just a doer.
I'm curious, Danica Patrick, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, she was a pioneer in there too, right?
Yeah.
Like, did you guys cross paths?
She was probably pretty much out of the sport, if not entirely out of the sport by the time, especially by the time I was getting to pro level racing.
Okay.
Um, in the racing ecosystem, I was just talking about this with some of my team members yesterday. The racing ecosystem is really it's larger than you think. So sports car racing, which is what I do, is kind of its own bubble.
Yeah.
Different from NASCAR, different from IndyCar, different from Formula
Yeah.
Racing. So there's these kind of 4 big umbrellas, and there's people like Catherine Legg right now that, is going back and forth, and she's doing some IndyCar and she's doing some NASCAR this season.
Yeah.
And Connor Zilic races like everything right now. Just to name a few, there's a lot of people that a lot of the Formula One drivers come and race sports cars in the winter just to stay in
Yeah.
the seat. But Yeah, we would never have really been in the same sphere anyway, probably.
Yeah.
But she was one of those people that, helped at she was a little older than I was, so it was like, "Okay, so this maybe is possible as a woman."
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, you had minimal people to be able to look up to as far as women pioneers, but you've mentioned a few already, right?
yeah,
And now your first answer to the first question was about you being that for other people and empowering them. I love how you've been able to take what really helped you, and now it's part of your mission and of how you want to be able to impact others.
absolutely. Yeah, visibility is so important. I think for any of us to be able to see people that look like us doing the things we wanna do, um, just makes it feel that much more achievable, and it makes it feel less scary, I think, because I think all of us I think fear is the biggest thing that holds us back, fear of the unknown, and if it looks a little less unknown, that makes a big
Mhm.
difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanna
You
go
mentioned
into
oh, go
Oh,
for
go
it, Gary.
ahead. Alright. Yeah, I wanted to go into something that you had mentioned earlier on already, and I'm just curious if you would use that term imposter syndrome in what you were feeling early on. Um, I'm just curious about that kind of mindset, and if so, what were the kind of thoughts that were plaguing you, and if you found any, like, just practical ways that have helped you kind of silence that nagging voice of imposter syndrome.
Yeah, Gary, to be honest, I feel imposter syndrome probably every day still. Um,
Welcome to the club.
yeah, right? And that's the big thing that, there's so many voices, you hear other people's voices, you see things on the internet that aren't even aimed at you, and you internalize it, and it just adds to that voice of "I don't belong." Um, and then
Mm,
you see successful people, and I meet successful people like yourselves, and other people that I've met this year that Mike Metcalf has introduced me to, and people doing incredible things, and it can be hard to feel like you measure up. So I think I think as an ambitious person, you probably bump up against that even more because the more things you try to do that are new, the more often you open yourself up to opportunity to feel like you're failing, or not living up. So, I think in order to quiet that, it's just like, you know, well, I've read some things recently, and a lot of people have talked about this recently that actually the more you introduce yourself to failure, the less scary it becomes, and the more you understand that you're capable of overcoming. And so, like, I think a lot of times it can be easy, and I certainly fell prey to this early on, to think that if I avoid failure, I'll be more successful. And I know that when I started the racing team a couple years ago, I went, "Oh man, if I can check all these correct boxes, I'll just come out of the gate swinging, and like it'll be amazing. And then I won't ever have to face that shame or that, whatever of people going, "Oh man, that she sucked," And it did not go like that. It was really hard to check all the boxes. They did not all get checked. And we got there, and there were a lot of things that we were like, "Oh God, we didn't think of that." I mean, we did pretty well, to be fair, but there were a lot of things that we were like, "Oh my God, why is this not working the way we thought it was going to work?" And, and instead, that first year, which is actually is this, there it is, this race car that's behind me here.
Yeah.
That
yeah.
first year was actually a really fun year because we kind of knew going in, but we definitely saw early on that we were not going to be competitive in that car. And we took it as a learning year. And we were fortunately in a series where we didn't have to keep the car like to factory standards. So we experimented a lot with the car, and it was actually really fun. It was such a fun project. My partner and I were working on it together at the time. And, for me to say, well, the car's doing this or it's not doing that. And for him to say, okay, I think I can fix that. I think I can move this here or do that there. And so that helped it not feel like a failure when we were constantly not finishing races, well, actually, that didn't happen. But like, finishing near at the back or finishing outside
Yeah.
10, getting, 15th place consistently. Um, when we knew we had drivers that were better than that, But the learning process made it feel a lot less like a failure of a season and a lot more like a growth season. I mean, in every race we were chipping away at those results and getting closer to the top. It's a lot. It's a lot to take on, but I think if you look at it as like, how can I just get a little better every day? It becomes a lot more surmountable. Can you
So is
use
that in
without insurmountable? Surmountable. I don't know.
yeah, yeah, either way. Um, is that an Audi R8?
It is. Yeah. Yeah. Fun
Very
car.
So
cool. Yeah, we've got another guest that has been on this podcast, but he doesn't race one, but he has an R8 that he loves, loves, loves. And so anyway, I was like, that looks like an Audi R8. Cool.
They are really fun cars. One of, the so I had one driver that kind of came with me from another program and she was like, okay, an R8. And then she got in it and she's like, dang, that's like a real race car. I was like, yeah, I know. It's not bad, right? It was just not competitive because it was a little older and it's heavier and not turbocharged. All the modern cars are turbocharged and it's just a
Oh, yeah.
different platform.
I love how much you just shared about imposter syndrome because it's something that everybody struggles with. And you had it in multiple facets here, right? You had it of I'm going to create a team and I'm going to have people underneath me and I've got to help lead them. And before that, you're in this male dominated industry where you're one of the only women. And so there's imposter syndrome and extra stress there. So what were some of the challenges of being in that male dominated type space that you had to overcome to be able to not only break in but keep pursuing the dream of the career of racing?
Yeah. I was lucky and I didn't have the worst experiences. Some women I talked to had far far worse experiences than I did. But there was always that doubt, and it was subtle in the way that it was uh sort of that it came across from the men I was racing with, but it would either be like, "Oh, it's cute that you're here," and then once you'd start getting a little competitive, it'd be like, "Oh, I can't believe I got beat by a girl." And then the next season, I would start getting closer and closer to the top. And the next season, they all came back and they're like, I got a new motor. I have 3 horsepower more now, and because I was spec racing at the time, where like you're looking for these little horsepower things, and I was like, "Really, guys?" And then I was like down further on the leaderboard again, and I was like, "Dang it, do I need to get a new motor?" It was just like this constant like I ended up being the motivation for them, but it was motivational for me in return because I was like, well, that's just so silly. Like you know, um, why does that matter? Um, but actually, and so there was a little bit of that. It's cute you're here. And eventually, once I started getting results and started showing that I was competitive and, made the same good and bad decisions that all the guys did, um, depending, then it was it actually was like, oh, it's really cool that you're here. I have a daughter. I love that she has you to look up to now so that she knows she can do like that she can do things that maybe are not typical for women. And what actually fueled me more at the time was that I was a member of a Facebook group where that was all women in the automotive and motorsports industries, and there was a lot of talk in that group from other women that were saying things about the famous like the Catherine Legs of the world and other women that were out there trying their hand at this sport at the time. And they were like, oh my God, I can't believe she's doing that. If she's not going to win, why is she even out there? She's just going to hurt our chances. And
Oh,
I thought that was the most fast
wow.
backwards attitude. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
how are we ever going to get anywhere if we're that afraid to try? And and I started thinking about it and I was like, there's only one winner in every race. That is a really hard spot to get. That means there are 20 or 30 or 50 losers, right? I mean, like, not to be, a loser is like a bad word, but like, um, that's that most of the men that are out there also aren't winning every
Right.
or winning ever.
Right.
So, like, maybe we just need volume. And so that was kind of like, not that I'm advocating for quantity over quality, but at a certain point, you just need to start getting your foot in the door. And I think with the right attitude, the rest will come.
Yeah. I I want to now pivot into the actual starting of a team because you hit on it earlier, and I think that transition is really interesting, especially like you said before, being semi-retired. So, talk to us about that transition in your life and how. Just take us through it, how it went, how you felt doing it, things like that. Whatever, wherever you want to take us here.
Yeah. Well, you know, so many things I could say about it. The beginning of it was a little messy because it wasn't when I thought it was going to happen. I had for probably 4 or 5 years the goal that of wanting to do that. I'd been telling myself, this is what I want to do when I'm 45. Let's say, that's by then I should accumulated enough experience. But I had a season that wasn't going really well with the team that I was with, and it just didn't seem like it was worth sticking around there. Um, and another driver at the same time was like, "Yeah, you're right. This isn't really working for us." And so she kind of came with me, and then I felt like I had grenaded her season, and I thought, "Well, gosh, how can I fix this?" Um, and it felt like someone had slammed this door in our face in a sense, but I was like, well, we have this little window maybe that we could climb through. And it was this R8. And I was like, okay, I have this R8 that we haven't driven in, it hasn't raced in a couple years. And I had just started dating a mechanic. And I was like, well, I was telling him when I was like, yeah, maybe we'll take it to this team or that team. Um, and have them run it for us. And he was like, yeah, I can run the car for you. And I was like, oh, okay. And my dad and my brother were like, "Yeah, well, we've always told you you should start your own team." And I'm like, "Yeah, and I've always told you that I don't really want to because it's going to be a lot more work. Like, I mean, I want to, but not like right now because you're never going to see me, and I'm not going to be as available as I was because it's a lot of work." And they were like, "You should do it. We have some equipment. We can make it work." So we did. So we went and we were like, okay, we're going to do the last race of the season and just see how it goes. And if it goes halfway okay, we'll try to do next season. Um, and so that's kind of how it started. And I quickly learned, like I said, that you can't just like get it all right from the beginning. There's not enough time. There's so many things you can't know until you do it. And then I also learned that trying to be two things was really hard. So when I got pregnant, it was actually kind of a blessing because being a driver still and being the manager and the owner was too much. It was too many hats to be wearing. And so when I got pregnant, it was an opportunity to step out of the race car, and an opportunity to hire more people that were smarter and better at things than I was to start moving the team in the direction that I wanted to take it eventually anyway, which is that, making it more professional, so that we can eventually go back and run in ProAm level series again. Because right now we're just in grassroots racing. Not just, but right now we're racing in grass.
Yeah. So if you would talk to the listeners that may not be as familiar with the sports car racing and like, they see F1, because they saw the movie
Yeah.
and they wanted to see Brad Pitt, so they got introduced to F1. Well, that's kind of the pinnacle, right? So let's talk about the various tiers and strata and like what each one is kind of like.
Sure. So F1 is definitely the pinnacle of racing if you're on four wheels. An F1 car, Formula car is an open wheel car, and there's a whole ladder to get to Formula One. You have to start in karting, and then you go up through Formula Four, three, two, one. If you're good enough, you'll make it to Formula One. Uh, but it takes even more than that. They all have to bring a lot of sponsorship as well. They have to develop partnerships when they're young that they can bring to the teams because it's such an expensive sport in the U.S. So that's kind of F1's mostly in Europe. Now we know we have a couple of races here that happen in the US. They go to Mexico, Asia. But that's been primarily a European series for a long time. And here in the US, IndyCar and NASCAR have been more common. So IndyCar is kind of a similar open wheel chassis to a Formula car. Um, and then NASCAR is a stock car, which is like a tube frame, they're both very lightweight, but tube frame, very lightweight car with a big motor. Um, and, as IndyCar sort of is maybe gentlemen's racing series, and NASCAR is maybe sort of the uh, redneck
Brawler.
series. Yeah. Although, honestly, they're both fascinating. And like as a driver, I love watching NASCAR because sometimes you'll watch for 30 minutes and be like, gosh, nothing is happening. And then all of a sudden, right at the end, all this strategy will happen and then the whole order will get shaken up. So I still think it's a fascinating sport, even when they're just turning left. Um,
Right.
and then and IndyCar does a lot of turning left too. Although they both do some road course racing, and so then that moves us over into sports car racing where we are. And sports car racing evolved out of evolved from gentleman racers and guys that didn't have money too, that were good drivers, um, racing around the roads, the country roads or the towns. The Road America in Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin. The first races they did there were they raced all around the country roads around the town, and then start finish line was in town. And eventually it got too dangerous. And so they started building purpose built racetracks. And that's where sports car racing came from. So now we have these great road courses that use the terrain and emulate country roads. And that's where sports car racing happens. And within the sports car racing, too, we have sprint racing, which is like 35 to 45-minute races typically. And then anything like an hour and beyond is called endurance racing. And so that would be like if you've seen Ford versus Ferrari when they race at Le Mans for 24 hours. So that is endurance racing, which is where we are. We're in a series called World Racing League. It's a grassroots series, and we do 8-hour races typically. But our Daytona race that's coming up is going to be 14 hours. So we'll go into
Wow.
the dark there because they've got the lights. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. Wow. Y- You, in such a short period of time, have had to, probably out of necessity, learn a significant amount about running a team, right? Versus what you said, can't get it all right the first time. So, taking a look back at when you started it, what were some of those blind spots or mistakes that you've been able to add to the team and the process and systems now?
Yeah. Well, I would say probably my biggest personal failure was holding on to control too tightly. And then being upset when people didn't do things the way I wanted it done. Um, and so learning to be a better communicator was a big one in the beginning. And then that eventually opened me up to like the more I was willing to communicate with other people and, learn from them, which I wanted to do from the beginning. But I think it was, there was this, like, again, this check the boxes idea. But the more I started talking to people and, actually, I did a personality test a couple years ago, which those are debatable how much value they have, right? But it was the Gallup Strengths Finder test. And my top
Oh, that's a good
strength,
one.
yeah, yeah. My top strength ended up being relator, which is about one-on-one relationships. And I don't, maybe it don't sound like it right now, but I'm a big introvert. Like this is easy for me, but you get me in a big group and I'm not super comfortable. I'd rather be at home.
Yeah.
So that was a surprise to me that a communication strength was my top strength. And then the rest of them are all like learning, teaching, that kind of mentoring, that kind of stuff. So that wasn't a surprise. So I've really leaned into that idea of relationship building. And the more I've done a good job of building one on one relationships, the more my network grows and the more I'm able to access people that have good advice and people that can point me in the direction of personnel that want to come help us with what we're doing and want to come work for us. So filling those holes of like just the management, especially in the technical roles, managing the technical roles that I don't have the background to know about. I need people that can pretty much run that without, I can say a yes or a no about financial decisions relating to the mechanical stuff, and I can sometimes express an opinion about like, well, doesn't that mean this? Don't we want to go in this direction? But usually, I'm at a point now where usually they're like, no, that's not how that works. And so it's been good to learn how to let go of the reins and let them be the experts and do the job. Um, which actually again, another atypical thing. I've had like a lot of careers. I was an interior designer for like 5 years. That's
Wow.
what my degree was in. Yeah. And so an experience that I learned in that in doing interior design was that I would work with like doctors and people that were very smart and experts in their field, and they would want to micromanage what I was trying to help them with. And eventually I had a guy that was like, you know what? You're the expert in this field, aren't you? And I was like, yeah. I've been to school for this, you know, and he was like, you know what, I'm going to let you do the space planning. You'll probably come up, you know, just because this is the way I've always had this office, like you'll probably come up with a way I can use it better.
Yeah.
And so eventually, like, well, hopefully pretty quickly leaned into that idea of like letting the experts in their part of what it takes to run a team just be the experts. And actually now I've sort of worked myself or hired my way out of a job. So I go to the racetrack and I don't do a whole lot now, except observe and sort of see how things are going and then try to like, you know, do make these little course corrections, right? Or maybe
Mhm.
big course corrections, you know, keep the cruise ship going, but without people noticing that I'm kind of directing it,
Yeah.
steering it.
Well,
Well,
I think you figured
congratulations.
out a piece about entrepreneurship that most don't. And we talk about on
Exactly.
here all the time of the business owner being the keystone in the business, meaning it's the keystone is the middle rock on an archway to
Yeah.
where if you take that out, the whole archway falls. So many small business owners get caught in that trap of they make themselves necessary for everything to run. And I love how you're building this team really early into this conversation. You mentioned hiring smarter people around you, right? What are your spots that you're not the expert and finding the experts in those areas? It's a lesson that most people listening and watching here need to take to heart of you cannot be the person running and doing everything.
Yeah. It's too much. You miss things. Things fall through the cracks. And if you don't, you know, if you're not an expert in that field, it can be easy to become mediocre quickly. Yeah, which is not there's nothing wrong with that either. Really, but I mean if it just depends on where you want to end up. If you want to end up somewhere bigger than where you're at now, you have to let go and you have to trust people. And it was actually, you know, going back to the imposter syndrome thing a little bit. Um, you know, I'm the vice president of our family business, but we have 10 employees. And most of them were hired by my grandfather and have been working for the business for 40 years. So, yeah. So I come in and I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to tell these people what to do so much as I'm just going to like let them keep doing what they're and like help them do their jobs well. So you know, I've run a business before, but not I've never built a team, and it's a very different experience, and so, you know, I felt in the beginning like I should know how to do these things, but there was a lot that I didn't know how to do, and, uh, I think where I was going with that is that my dad always told me, you know, because your grandpa and I, you know, your grandpa was so capable and I learned to be capable from him. And they did everything in their business. And that was a little more how it was back then too. They did everything. Um, they had a bookkeeper and a receptionist and they did everything else. Um, you know, they would hire an attorney here and there, but he's like, you know, I realized that I never learned to delegate, and he's like, "Sometimes I
Mhm.
think that has done us a disservice." Um, and ultimately that we never wanted to, run that business into you know, we never wanted to turn it into something where we had a huge team, so it was okay. Um, but I always remembered him saying that, and I thought, "Okay, if he thinks he's not great at delegating, I probably inherited a lot of that, or that was my model. So every time
Mm.
I wanna hold on tighter, I probably need to do the opposite, and I need to say, "Well, what would you do?" So I think that helped a lot, being able to have those frank conversations with my dad about, you know, what he'd learned or what his lessons were, and then see if I could, you know, take it to the next step, one step further.
Hmm. Yep. And with the personality test part that you hit on too, you've just been able to design a leadership style that fits you, right? There are some leaders where they're going to get in front of a huge group and they're going to rah rah the whole team and get people to follow them that way. And there's other people that are, hey, I'm going to support you and you're the expert and let me lead in a way that's much more empowering and much more personal and one on one.
Yeah.
And you've just found that grew for you. So I'm curious along those lines because I know you've got some really cool and unique things around the culture and driver development and things like that. Can you share some of the things that you guys have designed within the company around those things?
Yeah. We're still working on a lot of that, truthfully. It's and Mike kind of was the inspiration for some of this in a way, and another gal that I work with, Claudia Folga. But I met Mike through a keynote speech that he gave at the Women in Motorsports North America conference a couple years ago. And he said, culture is caught, not taught. And that really resonated with me. I thought, oh, okay, as a leader, that's really my job, is like to be the person that I want the rest of my team to be in terms of leadership qualities. And so it got me thinking along these lines of like leadership at every level. I was in the marching band in high school, and that was definitely an organization where the best marching bands expected leadership at every level, because and if we had a large marching band too, a 350 person marching band, like nobody could keep track of everyone. Nobody could be telling micromanaging everyone. So you had to have a certain level of uh, personal responsibility as part of the culture. And so that's something that we have. It's something that's inherent in motorsports to a large extent anyway. It has to be. We're all self-starters. Mostly everyone is an independent contractor. So actually most of my team are not employees. They're mostly 1099 workers. And so they're their own bosses. They get to choose, they work for multiple teams. They're racing usually with more than one team in a month, and certainly more than one team in a year. So it's like this idea of like, well, you have to own your lane. And so then we sort of through that like came up with our overall values, which are things like own it. Um, so if you make a mistake, it's okay. We're telling you, don't be afraid to make a mistake. I'd rather you make a mistake because you tried something that was outside the box, but just own it and move on quickly and say what you can learn from it, and then try again. And then that goes into another value, which is like refining. Just we're always looking to refine our systems, our processes, our, the speed with which we do things, because in racing, things happen so quickly, whether it's decision making or changing a tire, or fueling a car, you have to be so efficient. And there's always an element of human error. And so it's like, well, okay, how can we learn from whatever that human error was this time? Or wow, we didn't have much error that time. That was an awesome pit stop. Let's see, what are some of our other values? The leadership at every level, growth, having a growth mindset. And there's a fifth one that I'm blanking on right now. um, oh, just not, planning ahead. That's another thing that it can be easy to be like, well, we've all done this a long time. We've all been in racing 15, 20 years. Like, we know how to do this. We'll just show up and we'll just do it. Um, But sometimes if you don't plan ahead, you end up rushing around, and then the quality of the work isn't what it could be, or you end up staying late at the track and then you have to be there so early the next morning. Um, so our last value is to try to plan ahead so that we're not running around with like chickens with our head cut off, so that we like have a system. And that's been a hard one. That's been one that bringing a team together of a bunch of people who have worked in this industry a long time, but under different teams with different mindsets. People come in with a lot of like, well, this is how we do it. Well, this is how we do it. Oh, that's the other value. Question the status quo. That's my big one. This is how we do it. I hate that. I hate hearing that. This is how we do it. Okay, great. Why? Why do we do that way? Can we do it better than that? Can we do it different than that in a way that works better for us? Is what works for that other team going to work for us? So that's actually probably our biggest value, is question the status quo. And just in racing, things change so quickly. You can't just say, oh yeah, well, this is, we're going to have a tire pressure of 28. When you start an 8-hour race at 8 or 9 in the morning, you have to know, okay, so if my tire pressure is 28 in the morning, like, we get 20 degrees of temperature change from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., what is that going to do to our tire pressures? Okay, so what's our plan for
Right.
that? Um, so there's so much stuff that you just have to bake into that equation of like knowing it's going to change, and then anything that you think oh, well, that's a constant. It's not going to be. It's not going to be a constant forever. Whether it's this race or next race, it's going to change. So being able to be flexible and adaptable, um, is probably the biggest part of our culture, and feedback, because without the feedback, you can't grow, you can't refine, you can't be flexible. That's the hardest one, is the feedback, the real-time feedback. Because be an emotional sport too because of how quickly things happen
Mm,
and we're hard on ourselves. So that's probably the one that we're still refining is the feedback
yeah.
part.
I don't think you're alone there. I I would imagine in the sports world that's more extreme. So I used to coach college basketball and owned a basketball training company, and everything was elevated because of the emotions around it. That feedback had to be constructed in a way of, okay, when can I pull a kid to the side after a practice or something like that versus the middle of a game. So
Yeah.
what are some of the tricks you guys are learning to be able to give honest and candid feedback, but also respectful and constructive to where it's in a way that they're actually going to be able to do something with it?
Yeah. Probably our biggest tool in many ways has been data. And whether that's like data from the car for the drivers, because these days the cars there are sensors on a lot of things, and the higher up you go in racing, the more sensors you get, um, that can tell you, how hard are you hitting the brake pedal, how much are you turning the steering wheel. So data for the drivers, but also data, that data, there's chassis data. What are the shocks doing? Are they doing what they should be doing? So there's data for the engineering team to look at. And then we've even started putting cameras up, and we're not the first people to do this, but we've started putting cameras up on our canopies that film our pit stops so that our crew can go back and watch the pit stops later. Cause that's a harder one to get data. So it's like, oh, okay. Yeah. I see that I was in too much of a hurry, or I wasn't standing in the best spot, so I couldn't get the gun on the lug nut, or I couldn't get the wheel on the hub. Um, and so watching that kind of stuff, and then the other tool is just, I think, the idea that things trickle down, and knowing that if I'm open to other people's feedback, that they will hopefully be more open to mine. And that's been, learning experience too, like to not take that feedback personally. And, sometimes sometimes the hardest part is to say, okay, I love that feedback, but we can't do that right now. It's not in the budget, or we don't have room for that right now. But, learning how to take feedback gracefully, I think is helping, when I have to go to people and say, okay, I need you to be able to be, here at this time and to, do it this way or whatever. Whatever the thing is that I need to tell them, that it's a little easier for them when they know it's coming from a place of growth and not personal attack. And that it's
Mhm.
a standard that everybody is living up to. And some people do better with that than others. And so it's, I think the other learning experience is like, um, and it's good that I like the one-on-one relationships, because we kind of have to learn how each person takes feedback, because it's not going to be the same for everybody.
No.
Some people can do it in a group setting. Some people absolutely hate that. They do not want to hear anything about themselves in a group setting, and that's fair. So yeah, it's like you said, pulling them aside, after the game, after the race, or having a one-on-one call with them afterward. um, and and then I think the final component that we're working on now is the unemotional feedback. Um, Before I was a mother, I had a little more bandwidth, and so it was easier for me to have people come to me with a lot of emotion. I could parse through it better. But now that
Mhm.
my cup is a lot more full, I'm like, okay, please don't come to me if it's emotional, because I can't see the solution sometimes. All I can feel is your emotion,
No.
and I'm not sure what to do
Mhm.
with it. And so I'm like, if you need to have the emotional moment, like, go do it. Or if you need to vent and you're not looking for the solution, just tell me that first. Be like, okay, I just need to vent for a second, because I can do that too. I can be that, vessel for your your frustrations. But
Yeah.
to know, so it's that starts with me too. So like last year we had a race where we were doing so well, and it was like the first time we were like, oh my god, we might not only be on the podium, but we might win this race. Holy crap. Then 90 minutes from the end we got hit, and fell apart. And we finished the race in the end, and we, good points towards the championship and everything, but it was just so disappointing, and I didn't handle it really well. I was very emotional about it. And I realized after the fact that I wasn't there for my team members who were all
Yeah.
feeling emotional about it. So yeah, learning to be an unemotional place for people to come to, uh, or to be, if I'm going to have an emotion, let it be a positive one. And so I think the more that I'm able to do that, the more that trickles down and the more that everyone else feels comfortable.
So I've got a couple questions for you that are completely unrelated, but they are rolling around in my head. So one of them is, you mentioned early on, just kind of casually, yeah, my father and grandfather won a world championship in, offshore racing.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, offshore racing, I've got a former business partner that did that in Southern California as well.
Okay.
And so we'll have to compare notes afterwards. But um, that, like, that could be a very big thing, like you're in the shadow of a grandfather and father that won a world championship, and then, like, now you're doing something related but different. Did you ever feel like you were in the shadow, like you had to live up to a certain standard? Or what was the dynamic and the stuff that went through your head in
Yeah.
dealing with that?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. Because yes and no. Um, I never felt like there was pressure from them because of that, because of those honest conversations like I just talked about having with my dad. My grandpa also used to tell us, "Hey, it's okay to fail." Uh, he's like, I
Mhm.
buy buildings sometimes that just don't, they don't end up being a good investment, and we never get a good tenant, and it never really becomes profitable. But the best thing is to know that that wasn't a great decision, but it's okay because someone else will come by it probably eventually. You can, and I mean, that's always been the case. Move on from that choice. And, you'll have something left to, if you play your cards right, you'll have something left to go reinvest and, keep moving forward. So there was never pressure in that sense of like, you have to be successful
Mhm.
from them. But because I saw the example of them being successful, I put that pressure on myself. So so
Yeah.
yes and no. And so yeah, that was a big thing in the beginning that, I had the pressure, like I wanted to be like them, right? Not that I had anything to live up to, but I wanted to be like them. And then that pressure of being a woman in a man's environment. So the two things sometimes
Yeah.
were really I think drove me to be oh, maybe a little to have more bluster than I needed. Um,
Mm.
to try to feel like I had to fill a certain amount of space to be worthy.
Yeah.
Um, but actually, probably the biggest thing I've learned is that to take a step back and being a good observer is better than trying to bluster your way through things as a leader. Well, you know what? Even lower down again, that's not leadership at every
Yeah.
single thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I love your self-awareness, and, for anybody listening to this, especially if you're an entrepreneur, um, the wisdom of getting out of the Keystone trap that Ben was talking about, where not all roads lead to you, the fewer roads that lead to you, the better, and to where you can be in kind of your happy space or your thrive zone, which I think is really cool. So, I'll just tell you this on quieting that imposter syndrome, like, you're doing a good job, Aaron, just in the humility and the acknowledgement of lessons learned and things that for you to be able to go to a track and be almost a fly on the wall where it's not circumventing or circulating around you, like, that's a pretty cool thing. So kudos to that. So this is the completely unrelated, but this is a good friend of mine had a NASCAR team, and the saying goes, "How do you make a small fortune in racing? Start with a large fortune." And that was kind of true, what he experienced. And part of it was, he owned that NASCAR team when everything went to heck in a handbasket, in 08, 09,
Oh gosh.
when you had a lot of white hoods running around NASCAR track.
Yeah.
So he definitely felt the decimation that came with that. But the financial realities of owning a team and, like, what's that like? Like, how does so you've got 1099 employees that are coming alongside you, but there are still financial realities. Like, how does that work?
It can work in a lot of different ways. In my case, The real estate business is more or less funding the racing right now. We have a handful of partners and small sponsors that help, and we're continuing to build relationships in the hopes that we can get more sponsorship because to move up from the grassroots level that we're at, um, I believe at this point we'll really take that. We'll take some partners and sponsors to get to the next level and to be able to do it right. Um, Probably to be able to do it at all, honestly. So we're working on the relationship building aspect, and it's really difficult because it's an incredibly financially demanding sport. I mean, everybody knows just a street car is not real affordable anymore. Uh, so yeah, so imagine then, you're just adding zeros when you go racing, because of how much more wear and tear you put on things. And even in a series like the one we're in right now, where there's not a lot of crash damage, but you move up through the ranks and you get into where it's more competitive and there is more crash damage, you have to have a crash damage budget. And that's the part where I know if we want to move up, I can't, I don't have the resources to fund both what we're doing now, which is keeping the cars in good repair, and keeping them on the racetrack, but then also keeping them shiny side up, like because they're going to end up getting bashed around. So, yeah, so the financial realities are tough, and with some other ways people offset that, and it's something I'm working on maybe considering this year is bringing in customers. That's most race teams are either are mostly funded by customers. Sometimes you can get some factory support, but you bring on people that gentlemen racers that want to go racing that always grew up, wanting to be a race car
Yeah.
driver
How
and now
cool.
are
Yeah.
successful businessmen. And so that's how most people do it is with customer racers, and it's something we've talked about on and off. But then, it depends because, like, right now, I sort of consider what I'm doing, I guess, more of a charitable mission. Even though we're not a 501(c)(3), maybe we should be, but there's complications there too. And so, bringing in a customer distracts from the other mission. So you have to know that
Yeah.
you can manage that and balance that, which I think we could. It just it's a decision, more of like an emotional decision that we need to make.
Along the line of sponsors, um, I used to do work, and I worked very closely with the CEO of a large tire manufacturer in California.
I read that in your LinkedIn profile. Yeah, we work.
Yeah, so I'm curious, what tires are you running on that R8?
Yeah, we're running Yokohamas. We
Yeah!
are. Yeah, I know. How crazy is that? Um,
Advance, I assume.
yep, yep. The Advan, the AO52.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah, it is. It's a great tire.
Oreo Kirishima, I hope you're listening to this one. He was the CEO that I got to work with.
That's so
Loved working
cool.
with Kirishima-san. But, yeah, those are great, and they had come out with those Advans back in, gosh, when was it? '03, '04, something like that, when they were first coming out, so it was a really cool thing. That's really funny.
Yeah, yeah. You probably can't see the Yokohama sticker on the car, but I think it's on there somewhere. It's too
That's
tiny.
great.
But yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed working with those guys, more than another, one that is not on my LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, Yokohama's been great. They're interested in helping women in racing because I think because there are a lot of women in the company right now in positions that can affect a little bit of that influence. So
Cool.
they've been a great partner for us and some other teams. Um, other teams as well that are just not just but that are running men, but they've made it a point to try to help female racers and done some scholarships, I think, and partnered with Porsche and some different things um to help women in racing too. So yeah, they're really great. We love
Cool.
Yokohama.
Have you been able to go to their North American headquarters in Fullerton? I assume they're still in Fullerton.
They are, and I haven't. I have lunch sometimes with the head of marketing there, but we'll go out somewhere. So I should ask her
You
for.
need to, man. Yeah, you need to go see those guys.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we
We
like
don't even pick up
Yokohama.
our tires from there. We pick up our tires from a distributor in Laguna Beach or Laguna
Oh,
Niguel.
yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, they were very big with Tire Rack and those guys,
Yeah.
back in the day. So, anyway, how fun. Gosh, Aaron, first of all, big shout out to Mike Metcalf. Um, for making this intro. Huge fans of Mike Metcalf. I mean, what a great story. If
Mhm.
anybody hasn't listened to that episode, look him up. When he had on deck leadership, and dang, he's just such a good guy. But so thank you, Mike, for making the intro to Erin. It's a pleasure meeting you, by the way.
Pleasure meeting you as
This has
well.
been fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanna wrap up on one question because you were just talking about the mission of women in racing, right? And how that's why you kind of started AE Victory. What what's it look like going forward for you? What's your goal for where you have this or the impact of the mission 5 years from now? And that's an arbitrary number, right? You can take it wherever
Yeah.
you want.
Yeah. Well, our immediate goal is to try to do a pro-am program next year, in probably SRO GT4 America. And again, knowing that that's gonna whatever the number we think the budget is, you can probably add 30 to 50%. So that's gonna take some partners and sponsors. So that's a big push that we're doing right now, is to try to keep building relationships and keep reaching out to companies, and hopefully get somebody that's interested in what we're doing for the social ROI, as well as, see if we can figure out a way to have, some kind of a B2B, business partnership that helps them out as well. Um, you know, it's a little tough in racing because unless you're at the top tiers, there's like NASCAR or Formula One, there's just not a lot of TV coverage. But um, yeah, but some companies, the social media coverage is enough if you can do it right. So we're working really hard on our video and photography stuff, and so we're really working on honoring the partners that we have right now, um, to help us get to that next level. So I think ultimately, whether we're successful with that or not, just again being an example like of the willingness to try is probably the bottom line thing for me, is just, and I've already achieved that in some ways personally. Um, just from, the first win that I had when I was a driver, truthfully wasn't even really my win. It was a team win. I was in like seventh place. We came in for our pit stop, and the team did a kick-ass pit stop. I hope I can say that. Sorry. Um,
Yeah, you can.
And
and we ended up out in front in the lead by like 36
wow.
seconds. Yeah. And so that was my first win, and that had huge waves in the industry of, again, a lot of people being like, "Oh man, we needed to see that, it felt good that women can do this. You feel, your visibility makes it feel easier for me now to get into this." And within a year there were already twice as many women. The following year, there were probably 4 times as many women, like, globally
Wow.
racing.
How
And I know that
cool.
wasn't all down to me. There were other female drivers out there kinda doing the same thing, but I think it took that audacity of just being like, "Hey, I didn't start this as early as some of my competitors, but I'm gonna go try it because I need people to see that it's possible." And that audacity kinda worked, and now every year, there are more women getting into the sport, at all levels. So that's really the hope, is just to make a lasting impression so that others will do bigger and better things, because those of us that are here now um, pave the way as much as.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Amazing. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story. It's inspiring and motivating, and
Mhm.
I really appreciate the way that you've navigated going from one level to the next project, to the next thing, and keep your mission at the core of all of it. So where can the viewers and listeners go to check you out, check out the company, wherever you want to send them?
Yeah, we're mostly on Instagram, a little bit on LinkedIn as well, although I'll admit that I'm not great at keeping that up to date. Not as good. I am at Erin Vogel Racing on most social media platforms, but primarily Instagram. And then the team is at AE Victory Racing on TikTok and Instagram, I believe, is where we are now for the team. We also have www.aevictoryracing.com that you can go visit to see more of a big picture of what we're about and what we're doing.
Yeah. Incredible. Thanks so much.
Thank
Great job, Aaron. Thank you.
was great to meet you. Thank you guys so much for having me. This was really cool.